In 1968, Romania joined the club of car-producing nations and did it louder than anyone expected. The Dacia 1300 became more than just a copy. It turned into a symbol of national pride, even if it had French roots. The 1960s were the decade when the Eastern Bloc took car making seriously. Some projects were in-house, yet many relied on Western partners. In the late 60s, the USSR bought a license for the Fiat 124 and built a giant plant that became the champion of Soviet car production. Poland followed a similar path. I already have videos about those stories, and the links are in the pinned comment. By the end of the decade, Romania had no homemade passenger car and imported most vehicles from friendly socialist countries. At that moment, the leadership chose to change course and build a national car industry. Local engineers had little experience, so the country picked the same route as the USSR and Poland, a licensed design from the West. During the 1960s, the Romanian leadership under Nicolae Ceausescu was more pro-Western than the ruling elite of the Soviet Union or even Poland. In the USSR, politics partly shaped the choice of partner. The Italians from Fiat, supported by a strong communist party, while Romania looked wider, considering Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Peugeot, and Austin. Eventually, they chose the most ambitious option, the upcoming Renault 12, a project still under development and known inside Renault as R117, or the car of the future. The new model was meant to fill the gap between the Renault 8 and Renault 16. By 1967, a new factory called Usina de Autoturismo Pitesti had been built in the small town of Mioveni, near Pitesti, with technical support from France. The production of the new model was planned for 1968, both in France as the Renault 12 and in Romania as the Dacia 1300. Social unrest in France during that year delayed the launch by 12 months. To keep the new factory busy, Romania began producing the proven Renault 8, renamed Dacia 1100. It became the country's first passenger car. The delay actually worked in Romania's favor. Workers had time to test the production lines, gain experience, and perfect their methods on an established design, where all the early issues had already been solved. In 1969, the Renault 12 debuted at the Paris Motor Show, while its twin, the Dacia 1300, was unveiled at the Bucharest International Fair. The name Dacia was chosen for historical reasons, since, in Roman times, this was the name of the region that covered much of modern Romania. Production of the Renault 12 in France and the Dacia 1300 in Romania began at the same time, in 1969. Yet full-scale manufacturing in Mioveni started only the following year. Despite the popularity of the Renault brand in Europe, the Renault 12 never became a true bestseller. The long hood, sloping trunk, and large overhangs made the car less agile on tight European streets, and its high ground clearance, narrow tires, and soft suspension tuning limited its stability by continental standards. By the late 1970s, Renault introduced newer models, such as the hatchbacks 14 and 20 and the sedan 18, which quickly replaced the 12 in Western Europe. Yet, the Renault 12 found strong demand overseas, in South America, Africa, Iran, and Syria. It was roomy, durable, and easy to maintain, qualities that mattered most in developing markets. The Renault 12 became a real citizen of the world, produced not only in France and Romania, but also in Portugal, Argentina, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Spain, Turkey, Venezuela, and Belgium. At the Oyak Renault plant in Bursa, Turkey, production continued until the year 2000. In total, about 2.5 million Renault 12 cars were built, not counting the Romanian versions. Romanian buyers were more than satisfied with the new car. Just like East Germans with their Trabant, people queued for years to get a Dacia. The Romanian car, essentially a French design, was loved not only at home, but across the socialist bloc in Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and Bulgaria. Even the Hungarians, who had no domestic passenger car industry, often chose the Dacia for its simple design and fuel efficiency. From the beginning, the Dacia 1300, with its 1.3-liter 54-horsepower engine, came in several trims: the Basic, Standard, Plus Luxe, and Luxe Super, with better interior finish. Extra equipment included a radio, rear window heater, fog lights, 2 side mirrors, and even alloy wheels. However, the luxurious 1301 LS version was reserved for the party elite and never sold to the public. Later, the lineup expanded with the Dacia 1300 brake station wagon, introduced in 1973, and the 1302 pickup in 1975, with a payload of half a ton. By that time, Romania had fully localized Dacia production, and the license agreement with Renault was nearing its end. The government decided not to renew the partnership and not to launch a new French model, but to keep building the Dacia without Renault's technical support. It is fair to assume that Renault's withdrawal gradually affected quality. Even so, the Dacia remained popular and in demand across Romania. Annual output rose from about 50,000 cars to nearly 90,000. Romanian engineers eventually decided to refresh the model that had already spent a decade on the production line. In 1979, the car went through a major update. The new Dacia 1310 received a plastic front grille and 4 round headlights set in black frames. The bumpers became larger and the dashboard was redesigned. While researching this story, I often came across the opinion that the facelift ruined the original design. Frankly, I don't share that view. The updated version didn't make the car worse, and the Renault 12 itself could hardly be called a masterpiece of French design. The original 1300 series stayed in production until 1981. Interestingly, around the same time, Renault discontinued its own model, replacing it with the modern Renault 9 that matched the early 1980s spirit. Romania didn't stop at a simple facelift. Starting in 1981, a small series production of the sporty 2-door Dacia 1310 Sport began, later renamed Dacia 1410 Sport. Its 1.4-liter engine produced 65 horsepower, and the top speed reached a respectable 150 kilometers per hour. During the same period, Romania developed new pickups based on the front-wheel drive 1302. The Dacia 1304 came with rear-wheel drive leaf spring suspension, and a payload increased to 1 ton, while the 1305 kept front-wheel drive. In 1983, the grille became larger and chrome trim was replaced by the trendy matte black finish of that era. The sedan also received the 65 horsepower engine from the 1410 Sport, paired with a 5-speed gearbox, and adopted the same 1410 index. 15 years after production began, Romania built its 1 millionth Dacia. By that time, hatchbacks were becoming increasingly popular worldwide, and the engineers at Mioveni decided not to fall behind. They developed the Dacia 1320 hatchback, based on the same well-known chassis. Compared with the sedans, only a small number were produced, and the 1320 stayed on the line for just 3 years. By the late 1980s, hard times were coming for the socialist bloc, and the factory's engineers knew it well. They created a model that fit the spirit of those years, the economical Dacia 1210. Its engine was detuned to 49 horsepower, and according to the manufacturer, the average fuel consumption was only about 6.6 liters per 100 kilometers. However, the performance of an already modest car became even more humble. By the time the Ceausescu regime collapsed in late 1989, the plant in Pitești was in poor shape. It was building endless variations of an outdated design. Still, despite the country's difficulties, in 1990, Romania launched production of an updated hatchback, the Dacia 1325, named Liberta. After being transformed into a joint stock company called Automobile Dacia S.A., the factory tried to survive by expanding its commercial lineup. In the early 1990s, new pickups 1307 and 1309 appeared with double-row five-seat cabs. Interestingly, the Dacia pickups of that era were built with all drivetrain options, front, rear, and four-wheel drive. At the same time, the entire commercial range switched to diesel engines, using a 1.9-liter unit. It was these commercial versions that kept the company afloat. Developing a completely new passenger car was no longer possible, so the factory faced two paths: either continue producing outdated models with declining sales, or attract a foreign investor who would buy the plant and use it to build cars under a new brand. Romania found a third path. In 1999, the plant in Pitești was acquired by an old partner, the Renault Group. Surprisingly, after the French returned, production of the immortal Dacia did not stop. On the contrary, the car received Bosch fuel injection and several upgrades, including interior parts from the newer Silenza and new hubs with 5 wheel bolts. The 1.6-liter engine produced 72 horsepower and allowed the old sedan to reach 160 kilometers per hour. Even 3 decades after its debut, the Romanian car remained popular, mainly for its low price and inexpensive maintenance. Yet, the socialist Dacia no longer fit the new reality of a country moving toward the European Union. Passenger car production ended in the summer of 2004, when the plant began building a new era-defining model, the global X90 project, known as Logan, which took the place of its spiritual ancestor. The story of the Dacia brand is truly unique. It is one of the few car makers that survived the socialist era and the political transition while keeping its identity, and even its name. Unlike Skoda, which went through a similar path but moved far upmarket, the Dacia has remained true to itself. So far, it has managed to resist the pandemic of touchscreens and the obsessive cult of technology. And this is what makes its story truly special. Let's hope the modern Dacia never leaves this one right road and continues to hold its place, the place of dependable, straightforward cars. Cars, not gadgets.